Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name's Whoa. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. I will be right back. All right, you can open up your eyes again. This is much better. Not sure what happened, but as I was saying, my name's Diego, and today's video is going to be a breakdown of The Bridge. It's an intriguing puzzle game which was released on February 22nd, 2013. Despite being first and foremost a puzzle game, The Bridge has a thought-provoking story for eagle-eyed players, so if you missed it, don't worry, we got you. But before we hop in, if you want to support us, please take a second to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. We really appreciate it. Lastly, in a sense, our explanation will contain spoilers, so continue at your own risk. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's dive in. Starting off, let's make sure you're up to speed on Moritz Cornelis Escher. Also known as MC Escher, he was a Dutch graphic artist who passed away in 1972. He was and continues to be famous for his art, which heavily uses perspective, geometry, and illusions to visualize impossible spaces. Some of his most famous pieces are Relativity, Waterfall, House of Stairs, Hand with Reflecting Sphere, and Convex and Concave. There are many more pieces, and I encourage you to look them up. Now that you're up to speed on who MC Escher was, let's take a closer look at The Bridge, specifically who we play as. Yep, that's Escher. Referencing the legend of a certain someone being hit in the head by a falling apple, Escher wakes up and we control him as we traverse this black and white world. We see some of his first thoughts.
Only everything.
And this plays into the story later on. Our theory is that this game takes place in Escher's mind. There are a couple of clues that allude to this, and we'll point them out along the way. As we enter chapter 1, we can see a picture of a young Escher shaking hands with none other than the English mathematician, physicist, and astronomer Sir Isaac Newton, the falling apple guy. With Newton dying in 1727 and Escher being born in 1898, it's not apparent how they bridged time and met each other, which leads us to believe that Newton is a symbolic figure representing Newtonian physics and our knowledge of the observable world. In other words, Newton is Escher's ties to reality and helps keep him grounded. We can see Newton's influence on the chapter 1 puzzles, which place a large emphasis on gravity and its rotational direction. It would appear that getting hit in the head by an apple was Escher's subconscious reminding him of Newton, inspiring and giving him a mathematical starting point to build his creations. This is supported at the end of the chapter when we read Escher's thoughts.
I've finally found someone who shares my passion for esoteric mathematics. We've agreed to begin work on some of my ideas. With his help, my dreams could be realized.
If you're interested in seeing how Escher applied mathematics to his art in real life, I've linked a helpful video in the description below. Entering chapter 2, as seen in the main picture, an old Escher is still working with Newtonian physics and has discovered a vortex. I'm making an assumption here. He likely did this using vortex math, which is a real form of mathematics. In a really glossed down nutshell, vortex math is a system of numbers that proposes the essence of form, and everything we know is a sphere with a vortex. It ties into 3, 6, 9, the golden ratio, and many other mathematical things. Since this isn't supposed to be a math lesson, I've linked a helpful video in the description below which explains vortex math a lot better than I do, and its ties to some conspiracy theories. And just in case you get a little excited about those conspiracy theories, I linked a second video debunking them using the same math. Now, before we go any further, I want to clarify a few things. Since the game takes place in Escher's mind, the Escher we control is representative of his consciousness. As we traverse his mind, he's creating the levels as he goes. The paintings at the start of each chapter are symbolic of his mental state and the way he feels about his creations. In chapter 1, Escher and Newton were both young, symbolizing his excitement about using Newtonian physics to create art. As we can see in chapter 2, Escher has significantly aged and Newton has too. This is symbolic of Escher's growing dissatisfaction with Newtonian physics and wanting to go beyond them. With those clarifications, let's keep going. At the end of chapter 2, in the final level, the mausoleum, we see that Newton is dead. Above the door, we see the Roman numerals MDCCXXVII, which is the number 1727, the year Newton died. This is symbolic of Escher throwing away or moving past Newtonian physics and no longer being constrained. We get some more of Escher's thoughts supporting this.
We're like children with a bottomless toy box, creating and exploring, limited only by our imaginations. We cast aside theories of old and invent new ones beyond method or reason, our own world.
Entering chapter 3, we can see that Escher is now alone in the painting with a Penrose triangle, otherwise known as the impossible triangle. This is symbolic of Escher breaking Newtonian physics and Euclidean geometry. This is supported by the discovery of an inverse universe that Escher traverses to and from multiple times during the chapter. Things get interesting on and after level 2, the timepiece. Messing around with time and the inverse universe fractures Escher's mind, which had been previously grounded by Newtonian physics. At the end of chapter 3, we get get another glimpse at what Escher's thinking.
His life fades, and with it, the color of this world. I often retreat here alone now, spending ages away from reality, unable to bear the future. In my solitude, my feelings breed the strangest of creations.
Yeah, Escher, a Penrose triangle is a pretty strange creation. Since Escher mentioned color fading, it's worth noting that Sir Isaac Newton had a large influence on the color wheel and Roy G. Biv, which he developed by observing light bending through a prism. In other words, Escher's thoughts are symbolic of things becoming colorless, since he's no longer constrained by Newtonian physics. Again, his thoughts also support the idea that he is slowly losing his mind as he gets more absorbed with his work. In a moment of foreshadowing, at the beginning of chapter 4, we can see that alone, Escher has created or discovered a Tesseract, a 4-dimensional cube. During the chapter, we also see that Escher has discovered a way to transcend space using something he refers to as the veil. If it wasn't obvious from the painting at the beginning of the chapter, Escher's thoughts make it clear that he is descending into madness on his quest to create and discover more.
This world seems to pulse now in his absence, sending chills down my spine.
Whose absence? Newton's, Escher's, or both?
Now there's something else, something sinister. This morning, I woke to find it at the foot of my bed, waiting, staring.
Insanity has crept in. Exploring his mind a bit more, Escher's consciousness pieces his knowledge together and creates a bridge, transcending time and space. As he attempts to cross, something breaks, most likely his mind. A while later, Escher wakes up, which is symbolized by the color returning to the world. That was weird. Not sure why this keeps happening to me, but let's continue. At this point in the game, the story takes a bit of an odd turn. As the color is returning, the game cuts to its title screen. After the title screen fades, we see that Escher is nodding off under the tree again, but the color is gone. Now, the developers may have shown the title screen just to give players a sense of accomplishment for completing the first 24 levels, but I like to think there's a bit more symbolism to be found here. If you remember when Escher was crossing the bridge before it broke, there was a Tesseract. I believe that Escher's attempt to enter a fourth dimension was too much for his mind and it completely broke. As a coping mechanism, his mind reset itself. That's why the world is black and white again. Not able to handle the cost his creations incurred in real life, he has nothing left but his mind. As we wake Escher, we can see a Tesseract hovering in front of him. After interacting with it, the world mirrors itself. This sets the stage for the second half of the game. It may seem insignificant, but it is the beginning of Escher retracing his steps to try and get his mind back. As we progress through the next chapters, the paintings and thoughts that we see are representative of things Escher sacrificed for his discoveries. Again, there are a couple of clues that allude to this, and we'll point them out. As we enter the mirrored chapter 1, we can see an updated painting. Again, we see a young Escher and a young Newton. However, rather than shaking hands like in the first painting, both of their hands are cut off, and the orb that was originally in the painting eerily looks like a drop of blood. This is a representation of the extents Escher went to in order to make his creations. He made a vow, a symbolic blood oath to dedicate his life to his creations. Lastly, the painting is symbolic of his dedication, costing him an arm and a leg, or in his case, a hand. A true artist, Escher wasn't concerned with earthly things such as money and food. He affirms this in his thought,
"Everyone thinks me a fool. They don't see that my wealth in their world means nothing in mine. I will devote my life to this if necessary. Only he understands."
He deeply related to Sir Isaac Newton, who also dedicated his life to scientific discoveries and viewed him as a role model. In the next chapters, we see how his devotion came to fruition and had adverse effects on his mind and body. Leaving mirrored chapter 1 and entering the next one, mirrored chapter 2, we see another familiar yet different painting. In this painting, the papers and scrolls Escher holds are dipped in blood, hinting at the blood, sweat, and tears he put into his creations. We also see that Newton's face is blank. This is representative of how Escher began to forget our world as he continued to get absorbed in his work. Some more of his thoughts are,
"My colleagues suspect something. If they only knew the depth of our work, maybe then we'd be free of this shame. And yet, no. I fear they'd cast us out as heretics like the great Galileo."
Despite his desires, Escher kept his work hidden for fear of being outcast. Moving into mirror chapter 3, we can see that the painting of Escher alone with the Penrose triangle also appears different. In the startling image, Escher remains in the same position, but his background and the Penrose triangle have been turned upside down. This is a visual representation of how his life had been turned upside down due to extreme events, time travel, inverse universes, and the symbolic death of Sir Isaac Newton. Another thing worth noting is the blood dripping from his eyes, referencing the extreme stress Jesus Christ faced in the Garden of Gethsemane and his sweating of blood. Escher is also under extreme stress. His thoughts hint that this stress comes from the absence of being grounded by reality.
"He is gone. Like a ravenous beast, it gnaws at my insides. Darkness festers in the corners of my mind and brings about a stalking menace, perverting our precious creations. My last memories of him."
Man, I'm pretty intense about my work, but I don't think I'll ever let it stress me that badly. Rather than focusing on creating beautiful beautiful art, Escher became so absorbed with his work that he quite literally lost sight of himself. The beginning of Mirrored Chapter 4 provides a horrifying image of Escher. His eyes are completely gouged out, with blood gushing from them. He has been brought to his knees in front of his ultimate creation, the Tesseract. We can see a pair of hands grabbing his shoulders. Death, and he is at its door. His work has cost him everything. Despite his self-destruction, his consciousness wishes to find a way back to reality. A bridge. His thoughts affirm this.
The cube. Birth from my burdened soul. Its incessant undulation is maddening. It defaces our world and keeps me hostage to what was once beautiful. Will I see him again across that bridge?
In a desperate cry to return to normalcy, his consciousness finds the bridge back to reality. Calling back to his thoughts as he walked across the bridge for the first time.
It is no special feat to walk between the impossible. It is me, the bending stars, and the stone. Even now, as the night comes to close, I understand their endeavors. What do I surrender to cross this bridge?
This time, when he attempts to cross time and space, he sees Newton and himself. As he approaches them, and hopefully reality, his mind completely shatters again. The bridge breaks, and his consciousness begins its work anew. With salvation at his fingertips lost, we see his thoughts.
Only everything.
Calling back to the start of the game and his previous question,
what do I surrender to cross this bridge?
Escher has no hope of returning to a normal life. Tragically, he will forever be haunted, and each time his consciousness repairs itself, it will shatter. A man beyond time and space, Escher will never be the same. Thank you for listening to our explanation and theories of the bridge. If you enjoyed the content, leave a like and hit the subscribe button down below and the notification bell. We really appreciate it. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. There were a couple of websites that helped inspire this video, and I've linked them down below. If you like the bridge or want to see our review on it, use this link right here. Our next video is going to be a walkthrough with commentary, so stay tuned. My name's Diego, and I'll see you soon.